Today's video is brought to you by AG1. If you're thinking about doing a road trip and you have a choice between different Tesla models, does it make a difference to have a Tesla Model Y long range versus a Tesla Model 3 standard range? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This idea came from a practical idea, which was that we recently went to my parents' house, which you can see right here, which is in Springfield. Blocked out the actual address, so you can't see that, of course. But anyway, I was thinking about it. We took the Model Y, and of course, that's got the full self-driving beta, so that makes it very nice. But the Model 3, on the highway, it's actually relatively pleasant too, because it does lane keeping and traffic-aware cruise control and all that stuff. So I thought to myself, well, if we'd wanted to take Black Beauty here, the Model 3 standard range, which as you can see on this screenshot has a maximum range of 264 miles. Supposedly it's about 267, but anyway, it adjusts over time. Anyway, our Model Y long range currently has a maximum range of about 296 miles, or about 91% of the original mileage, which was 326. So this isn't a perfect comparison. If you bought a brand new Model Y, it would have an extra approximately 30 miles of range on it. But anyway, what I wanted to do was compare the trips between the standard range Model 3, which has 32 miles less range than our Model Y. And what I was curious about was whether there would be a significant difference in charging time. So if you don't know, and most people who drive Teslas probably do, but if you don't, then you probably don't know this. But with an electric vehicle, you can fill the battery from like 10% to 80% really quickly. You can utilize a lot of the supercharger's power, which is to charge it super very, very rapidly. But as you get over 80%, it really, really tails off and does not charge nearly as quickly. And so the difference in 30 miles of range is the difference in whether you're charging the vehicle to the maximum capacity, which is going to take a long time, or whether you're still in that sort of 10 to 80% buffer where the vehicle can charge very, very rapidly. And so what I did was I took 3 different trips that we've actually already done ourselves, so I had a pretty good sense in my head of what they are. Number 1 is from Athens, Georgia to Springfield, Virginia, which you can see right here. Number 2 was Athens, Georgia to Austin, Texas, which I'll show next. And then it's Athens, Georgia to Brownsville, Texas / SpaceX headquarters. So as these screenshots will show you, and I apologize for how dusty the screen is, you don't notice that until you take a picture and then it's like, ew. But anyway, these show Tesla's navigation systems, estimations of how long each segment of the trip will be, how long you'll have to sit at a supercharger, and all of that kind of stuff. And I did have to start both of these trips at slightly different times because I didn't have both of the vehicles charged up completely at the beginning, and I wanted to do a fair comparison. So anyway, you'll see that the Model Y is at night, and sorry for my hands in the shot. It's hard to avoid those reflections at night. But what I noticed was, except for the first leg of the trip, all of the other legs were identical, because I assume after the first leg, it's not really taking account of traffic and just using a default. So what I did was I set the first leg to be the same exact amount of time, and then the rest, unless it was different superchargers, I just kept the times all the same between all of them, so that the travel time between each leg of the trip is the same between the 2 vehicles. And I think that makes a little more fair comparison, since I didn't do the live updates at the exact same time. And what I'm going to do is show you the screenshots, but then I'm going to flip to a spreadsheet where I took the time, and it was a pain in the butt to do all of the calculations. They aren't really there in the Tesla app, so you have to subtract time and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'll show you most of the work in the spreadsheet so you can see it, but you can always pause the video, and you can of course look at these screenshots to verify that I'm being accurate here. More on this in just a second, but first a word from AG1. If you're like me, you think a lot about what you put into your body. So of course that means you want to eat right, exercise, and take care of your body. And one of the best ways that I've found to do that is AG1. This stuff is absolutely fantastic. I really am being honest here. I've been using it since February 1st of this year, and it has made a huge difference. I have so much more energy than I used to. I feel much more virile, and just ask misinformation about that. And I'm able to accomplish so many more things that I had been able to just a couple of months ago. It's got 75 vitamins, minerals, probiotics, prebiotics. It supports your gut health, your immunity, and on and on. And you know what? It tastes great too. It really does taste sweet. It has a hint of pineapple, and it doesn't have any added sugars, which is also really nice. And you know what else is great? If you click the link in the description, you get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamins D3 and K2. That's a pretty good deal. And lately I've been making use of the travel packs because I've been going to the gym in the morning and having to go straight from there to work. And I do intermittent fasting, so I don't want to eat first thing in the morning. So what I do is I just take a travel pack with me. I fill up the bottle with water at the gym. I put in the travel pack. I shake it up. I drink it on the way to work, and I feel fantastic for the rest of the day. So if you care about your health, your energy, your vigor, and etc., I highly recommend trying out AG1. And you know what? You can try it risk-free for 90 days. So what do you have to lose? So if you want to feel better today, click my link in the description, get your travel packs, the vitamins D3 and K2, and a 90-day risk-free trial. So take it from me, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. And in a couple of months, when you're feeling way better than you do right now, you can thank me. All right, so here we are in the spreadsheet. Down here, you can see that this is the Springfield trip. And what I've got over here on the left is the Model 3, and over here in the middle at column H, is Model Y. You can see 264 mile max range, 296 mile max range, a difference of 32 miles. And so the question is, what difference do we see between the two? So what I've got here is drive segments, and I did decimal hours just to make it easier to add and subtract hours, but I'll show you the total time in like actual hours. So anyway, you can see the entire time after all of this stuff, after all the segments of driving and the supercharging time for the Model 3 ends up being 10 hours and 24 minutes and a total distance of 592 miles approximately. You can also see up here that the total supercharging time was 1 3/4 hours or 1 hour and 45 minutes, and the driving time was a little shy of 9 hours. And then if we flip over to the Model Y, you can see interestingly enough that it picked the exact same supercharger locations. I thought it would actually end up picking different superchargers, but it didn't. But the difference is in the supercharging time. So you can see here that at Piedmont, it was half an hour, and here it's 20 minutes, and here it's 25 minutes, and here it's 20 minutes, and here it's a half an hour, and here it's 25 minutes, and so on and so on. So the Glen Allen ends up being the same. So anyway, the total supercharging time ends up being 1.41 instead of 1.75 hours. And so down here, we can see that the difference in time is 0.34 hours or 18 minutes, which is not a lot. And if you take the difference in supercharging time divided by the distance that you've traveled, so this is the total distance of 592 miles, it's actually 0.06%. That's not 6%, that's 0.06%. So it is a tiny difference. Effectively, it's about a 20-minute difference in the trip if you take the Model 3 versus the Model Y. So it's not a ton of difference. Next, let's go ahead and look at the Athens to Austin, Texas trip. Here you can see the screenshot on the Model 3 with the superchargers starting in Oxford, Cottondale, Pearl, Ruston, Lindale, Temple, and finally to Austin. And on the Model Y, you can see that there is a little bit of difference here at the end, and I'm not exactly sure why I couldn't fit it all on one screen, so I had to take it on two. But you've got the first stop, Oxford, Cottondale, Pearl, Ruston, Lindale, so those are all the same. But then we get Waco, Texas before the Austin destination, whereas here we had Lindale, Texas before the Austin destination. Doesn't really end up making that much of a difference, but we will take a look. And so onto the spreadsheet where you can see how long each part of the drive was, each part of the supercharging time was. Total drive is 14.83 hours. Total supercharging for the Model 3 is 3.84 hours. And you can see the Model Y, because I fixed all the times to be the same, it's 14.83 hours. Actually, it's 14.77. There must be something that's like, because of the difference here. Yeah. So when we get down to Waco and then to the destination, there actually is a very slight difference. So you can see that we actually ended up saving a very small amount of time in terms of drive time by going to Waco instead of Temple. So that's the difference in the time between the two vehicles. And then of course we go between 3.84 hours and 3.09 hours, which ends up being a difference of 0.81 hours or 50 minutes. So 50 minutes is a reasonable amount of time, but of course it's also an 18-hour and 40-minute trip. But you can see that the change in supercharging time divided by the miles, which is 988 miles, is only 0.08. So a very little bit more than the Springfield trip, but really, again, not that much difference. All right, and finally, let's go from Athens to Brownsville, Texas, which is right near South Padre Island and SpaceX's headquarters. So you can see here we went Auburn to Evergreen. Both of those are my least favorite superchargers in the world, by the way. I've had bad experiences at both of those. Then to D'Iberville, then to Baton Rouge, then to Iowa, then to Channelview, Texas, down to Victoria, down to Kingsville, and then finally to Brownsville. And interestingly enough here, even though this is a longer trip, if we look at it, we have the exact same superchargers. So you can see Auburn, Evergreen, D'Iberville, Baton Rouge, Iowa, Channelview, Victoria, Kingsville, Springfield and Brownsville. And so now if you look at the total drive time between the two, because all of the stops were the same and I kind of set the first destination to be the same drive time, even though it wasn't exactly the same. Anyway, the total drive time for both of these is 17.5 hours more or less. But then of course you can see that the total charge time for the Model 3 was 4.34 hours versus the Model Y, which is 3.68 hours, or a difference of 40 minutes. And so you might go like, wait a second, that's only 40 minutes for a 1,211 mile trip versus Austin's trip, which was only 988 miles and had a 50-minute difference. And I think the reason why is when you go to Austin, it was able to skip over the one stop in Temple and go to Waco instead, and that made it a slightly more efficient trip. So anyway, that's really interesting because you don't automatically get a bigger difference the more miles you go. It really has a lot to do with where the superchargers are, how they're located, and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, down here you can see that the change in supercharging time divided by the distance is only 0.05%. And actually, if we look back at Springfield, that was 0.06%, and Austin was 0.08%. So actually the Brownsville trip, even though it's the longest, has the smallest change in amount of charging time per mile driven. And then finally, we can look at the percentage time spent supercharging of the entire trip. And you can see here for the Springfield trip, it was just about 20% for the Model 3 and about 16.3% for the Model Y. For the Austin trip, it was almost 26% for the Model 3 versus 21% for the Model Y. And for the Brownsville trip, it was nearly 25% for the Model 3 and still about 21% for the Model Y. So flipping back to Springfield here, one interesting thing is you can see that the percentage of charging time is significantly less if you're only going like 600 miles versus if you're going a much longer distance. And I think that difference is that you start off with a full charge. So, it's sort of like how the whole thing works out. That first stop, the first distance that you get to travel, and then the amount of charge you use up per each one in the future means that for shorter road trips, you're sort of getting a benefit of starting off with a full charge. Whereas for the longer ones, you're draining the battery. And so you're spending more and more percentage of your road trip actually sitting at the supercharger. And again, the biggest difference here is the Austin trip, again, probably because we've got the Temple versus Waco stop, but you can see that you've got an almost 26% supercharging time versus a 21% supercharging time for the Model Y. Whereas for Brownsville, it's less than 25% and then the same amount of supercharging time for the Model Y, more or less, as the Austin trip. All right, so in conclusion, for me and for anybody else who's considering it, like if you're considering purchasing a standard range Model 3 versus a long range Model Y, you of course think to yourself, is it going to be worth it if it's very important to me to be able to do longer road trips? And if saving every minute is the most important thing in the world to you, then yeah, you're going to want to get the Model Y long range. But I was actually shocked to discover that, for example, driving to my parents' house in Springfield, it would only make an 18 or 20 minute difference between the two different vehicles driving there. So that means that I'm not nearly as concerned about driving the Model 3 as I used to be. I thought that it would take me an extra hour or two to be able to get to Springfield. 20 minutes, honestly, when you're, getting food or going to the restroom or just hanging out, whatever, those couple of minutes just kind of disappear and you probably wouldn't even notice the difference between the two vehicles. Now, of course, the longer the trip, the more time difference there is between the Model 3 and the Model Y long range, obviously. But again, it's not that much difference if you kind of think about it in terms of that percentage. The change in supercharging time divided by the number of miles is less than 1% in every single one of these cases. So even if you're looking at like an extra 50 minutes on a trip, if it's an 18-hour trip, are you going to notice it that much or not? Again, if you're super concerned about getting to someplace as fast as humanly possible, then yeah, but probably you're also going to want to drive a gas car at that time because you can fill it up faster. And if that's the kind of thing you're going to do, then obviously with a gas car, you can go faster than an EV in general. But if you're going to drive an EV, it really doesn't seem like it makes that much difference between the standard range Model 3 and the long range Model Y. Now, of course, it'd be really interesting to check this out with a brand new Model Y long range that has an additional 30 miles of range on it from what I have right now. Having an additional 30 miles might actually make this a more significant difference than it is with our older Model Y. So if anybody in the area, like the Atlanta, Athens area, happens to have a very new Model Y that has still about the 325-mile range, definitely let me know because we can redo this with the new car and we can see what kind of a difference it makes with that. In the meantime, if you're a normal human being that doesn't care quite so much about exactly how long it takes for a road trip, and you're not doing road trips all the time, like you're not a traveling salesman where every minute counts, if it's just a once in a while sort of thing, I really think that the Model 3 standard range is a perfectly adequate road trip car, as well as the Model Y. Now, of course, you can't sleep in it as well, so that's another advantage that the Model Y has, but that's a different story. But as far as charging time is concerned, the Model 3 is a perfectly good road trip car. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking and kind of useful. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it, and of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. And also let me know if this alters your buying plans for the future in the comments. I would be very interested to know. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon patrons and my YouTube channel members. Thank you all so much for your support. You really do make this all possible, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget to click the link to AG1 in the description and start feeling better today. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.